Good evening and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on our Economic Forum, where we discuss all things relating to the economy. I'll be your host for the evening. My name is Farai Gwaze. Feel free to also be part of the conversation, engage with us, send us your questions, comments, and your contributions on our WhatsApp platform. But also don't forget to follow us on our social media. That's Economic Forum Zimbabwe. Today we'll be looking very closely at the current state of sporting codes in Zimbabwe, but more importantly, their economic viability. And my guest in studio helping me unpack this very fascinating issue is Mr. Russell MARADZA MHIRIBIDI, who is the president of the Sports Leaders Institute of Zimbabwe. MHIRIBIDI, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good evening, Farai. Good evening, Zimbabwe. It's a pleasure to be here on the Economic Forum.
All right. Now, I think we can start from when COVID came in. Yes. I think that there globally, of course, all sporting codes managed to feel the pinch, if I could loosely call it that. Briefly give us an understanding of how COVID has affected sporting codes in Zimbabwe.
COVID has really affected sport in Zimbabwe because unlike the other leaders in the global world that are very proactive, we tended to have been caught unawares with our pants down, if I may say that, because we didn't expect that level of impact, negative impact on our sporting. We quickly stopped. Remember, other countries, their leadership in sport is very proactive. They treat it as a business. They don't treat it as much of a hobby or an accident as we tend to do it in this country. So you look, for instance, at Wimbledon. Wimbledon had put up an insurance policy since 2014, so much that they indemnified themselves against such eventualities. But come to us, I'm sorry, we're not that proactive because we've not been treating it as a global billion-dollar business that it should be. We want it to be a business. We hope that will be a global earner, but we are not putting the right basic fundamentals for us to be able to reap from that. So yes, COVID has really affected. It actually made us stop everything, and that was not helped either by our sporting fraternity leadership that had not been proactive.
Let's look closely at the staggered process or approach that was taken towards opening up the sporting fraternity. The first sporting code in line with COVID regulations was golf, if I'm not mistaken, and I think a few others that you may indulge us in. Briefly tell us a bit about that process and how you feel it may have contributed towards at least opening up the sporting codes.
Yep, because golfers, naturally, the professional ones are competing on a circuit, so they understand what it means not to play. So they quickly came up with a plan, a biosecure bubble plan that would enable them to play. And remember, golf is also very non-contact, there's minimal contact. So it was easier for the authorities to be able to give them a green light. Then we also have other disciplines like tennis, where they are also kind of minimal contact. But the biggest challenge that I have is even with the contact sports. You see, at the end of the day, we have people that ride in buses that are way closer than those that take part in sport. And in buses, there's not as much control as that you get in sport. And in sport, there are rules and regulations that are easily followed, unlike when some people are riding on buses. But look, our sports leadership decided just to follow everyone else in the country, and then they forgot that it was a multi-billion-dollar industry. A multi-billion-dollar industry that closes for 2 years. What industry closes for 2 years and will survive?
Right. I'm glad that you do bring up the multi-billion-dollar industry aspect, because that's the relevance of how Zimbabwe then ties into tapping into that multi-billion-dollar industry. A lot of the athletes, or if I could say sports men and women during COVID found themselves not being able to train, not being able to condition themselves. The question is, at whose cost then do we find our sportsmen and women having to be able to compete and enter into this billion-dollar industry?
You know, if you want to compete and if you want to run any business, you must invest. And in sports, we have a lot of people that come with very brilliant manifestos when it comes to election times. And these people are the people that must lead in times of need. Leadership is all about coming up with solutions. Right. So our athletes, yes, were let down by the leaders that did not provide a platform, a safe platform for them to take part in sport.
So talking about leaders, currently the Zimbabwe Olympic Committee recently had some new board appointments. The current minister also came from a similar committee. We have seen a transition of sportsmen and women transitioning to becoming administrators of various sporting codes. Surely that should be able to mitigate some of the concerns that you have raised around leadership not stepping in to cater to the need for sporting men and women to enter into the billion-dollar industry.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the current setup where you get a minister who's an Olympian, a decorated Olympian. Even the directorate at sports, if you look at the people there, they are people that have done something about sport, and for the first time we are getting professionals being put into positions.
Is that a good thing?
It is a very good thing, but at the same time as well, being an athlete and then developing into an administrator does not make you a sport entrepreneur.
Right.
We need people with entrepreneurial skills that are able to tap and see how they can get value. We need people that understand how their assets and what channels they can use to add value to sport, and that is a long process. We need to treat sport as an academic persuasion and for it to be the business that we want it to be.
All right. Now, also, before we take a break, I want to appreciate the sustainability of the current state of sports in Zimbabwe, more importantly inclined to economic viability. What's our current position?
Economic viability has a lot to do with businesses getting mileage, sponsorships, partnerships. But for as long as we don't have the media involved, especially television, no TV rights, we are going to be lagging behind.
What do you think contributes towards such poor or lack of visibility?
It's all about leadership. When leadership sleeps on its laurels, this is what you get. And you remember other sporting codes, I will not mention them by name. They had TV, but they decided that they would get a better deal before they even had a pre-contract with the service provider, with the media provider. They decided to cut ties with the one that they had. You know, the case of a dog with a bone looking at a bucket of water, right, and then drops that bucket because he wants a bigger bone. So that's the problem.
Could it be that the administrators are failing to give an adequate platform for private capital to come in, or is it that private capital just doesn't see a need to want to even get involved in financing and contributing towards the sporting code development?
I'm a sports leader and I want corporates to come in, but where there's no value, where there's no visibility, where there's no mileage, I would not get in.
And on that note, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back with more Economic Forum. Stay tuned. Welcome back to this second segment of our Economic Forum, where we discuss all things relating to the economy. Today, we're looking at the current state of sporting codes in Zimbabwe, but more importantly, their economic viability. I'm joined by the president of the Sports Leaders Institute of Zimbabwe, Mr. MARADZA, MHIRIBIDI. Now, before we took the break, you're at least giving us some sort of an appreciation of what the current state is in terms of economic viability. What sporting discipline currently contributes to the largest revenue generated in sport for Zimbabwe?
I'll start with globally. The biggest sporting brand is football. So we follow global trends, and football, again, in this country, has mass support. I'm not too sure about figures because, you know, in everything else, in God we trust, but everything else requires data for us to have business insights and artificial intelligence so that we can then say who is bringing what and who is bringing this. But from a layman's perspective, and just looking at the numbers generated, you'll see that football generates a lot of money. Maybe cricket to an extent, golf for individuals. But as a mass sport, football is the number one sport.
Right. Now, on the premise that there's a billion-dollar industry that we would tap into, we then find ourselves asking the question, how are we failing to use that which could be, if I could call it loosely, our cash cow to our advantage? What, in your opinion, has contributed towards that lack of engaging in that aspect?
In all our sporting disciplines, ZIFA, PSL, we have elected leadership. And these are, obviously, if you're elected, you're a politician because it's a game of numbers, people voting for you. Then we've also got the secretariat that are supposed to be professional people. But then what happens is we've seen a lot of fights when someone is put into position in any sporting organization, let alone ZIFA, PSL. You'll find that people tend to want to fight those that are in position at the expense of development. So in my opinion, you know, I believe as sports leaders, whatever, whether we like the leader or not, once we give him a mandate, let's support him to the max.
Right.
If you don't support a leader who's been put into leadership and you want to pull him down, you are part of the matrix that is hindering sport to become the multi-billion-dollar business. Even if I like Mr. Kwazi, if you are the president of Zimbabwe football and I was your adversary, as soon as elections are over, we should all then get back to putting our shoulders on the pedal and pushing football forward.
Right.
Because who knows, you may want to inherit a football association that has been standard in terms of growth because we're busy fighting the leader. And that is very bad, and that is very detrimental to the development of anything, even into national building. That is very bad.
It also seems to speak to, what you're raising up seems to speak to a loss that we would be incurring in terms of the talent that we have in Zimbabwe. I think we have clearly shown that a lot of the raw talent that's in Zimbabwe has found itself outside of our borders and developing elsewhere. Where are we missing it?
We're missing it because we're fighting, and if our athletes are not too careful and they don't find alternative areas to go and take part in their sporting activities, they will lose out. You will find our athletes going to Botswana. You know, if a footballer goes to Botswana, for crying out loud, I think we're a better footballing nation than Botswana. But Botswana now is putting systems that allow for deliberate long-term athlete development. With the likes of, let's leave football, Manucci, he was developed in Zambia. Even though we all wanted to be on the glory trail when he won the African Championships and defended them. So it's a bit unfortunate. You'll find most of our athletes, right now our athletes are going to Zambia, they're going to South Africa. Why? Because the people there have organized themselves, and the sports responsible authorities are ensuring that sport takes the center stage, not personalities.
Right. So there are many platforms, or should I say engagements that have happened to be able to ensure that funding does spill over into the development process, into making sure that the young future talent can be harnessed. Clearly there's a disconnect, or is it that this funding is not getting there, or it's being misappropriated? Leakages, what's going on?
We don't have strong structures in place, and in terms of turning our sport into that global business that we're talking about, and be able to have athletes live off sport, not subsistence living, but proper living, you know, they can get their status as sports people. They also compete with other sectors of the industry. We are not affording that. So it is high time we all came together and ensured that our sport became that industry that we need to be. And we can only do that if we work in unison.
Well, I think if I can at least appreciate the fact that the unison issue seems to be the common denominator and contributing towards us alleviating some of these issues. Billion-dollar industry. The question once again is, how does Zimbabwe tap into it? We acknowledge that football is the mainstay globally, and Zimbabwe should be able to take advantage of that. What basic approaches, just from your understanding, have been taken so far to be able to engage that?
If you're going to ask me what has been taken, like right now in the last 2 years, there's been no sport, nothing has been taken. Right. But if you're going to ask me what can be done, yes, I can come up with that.
And I'm going to ask you what can be done straight after the break. We'll take a short break right here on Economic Forum. Stay tuned. Welcome back once again into this third and final segment of our Economic Forum, where we discuss all things relating to the economy. Today, a very exciting topic that looks at the current state of sporting codes in Zimbabwe and economic viability. Currently joined in studio by the president of the Sports Leaders Institute of Zimbabwe, Mr. Russell MARADZA and MHIRIBIDI. Now, before we took that break, you brought up a very pivotal question. How then do we tap into the billion-dollar industry that is sports currently with the models there in Zimbabwe?
You know, the base is there, and all we need to do is apply the right basic fundamentals. And what are the right basic fundamentals? You know, we're talking about sports, and anything that's got mass participation is something that sponsors and partners are going to want to be involved in. We also look at the issues of playing in empty stadia when it comes to sport, save when Dynamos, Highlanders, Caps United, maybe FC Platinum play at their home grounds. You will have 100, 200 spectators in grounds. Why is that the case? It is because we are not packaging our product properly. We are not increasing user experience. Because the user experience, when people go to a soccer match and they enjoy every bit and part of being there, create a family environment that families can even go and watch football together, then you're bound to get more people coming in. We also looked at issues to do with the world is going digital. Right. And if there's no digital transformation of our sports entities, then we're just going to be 30,000 light years behind. Okay. You know, the use of data, the use of our gadgets, our Android phones that we all have, that we use for sending messages to ensure that we engage more with fans. We have a lot of these big 3, big 4 clubs that claim to have so many fans. But how much fan engagement are they having with their perceived supporters? Right. They don't even know they can't even segment their supporters to different segments so that they get the right information that they should be given.
Talking about a basic fundamental that I want to tap into that you also did bring up, you find that certain teams, be it within the EPL or PSL, whatever it may be, may bring in players for jersey sales. So what I'm acknowledging here is that the selling of jerseys seems to be a very basic model that football is used to be able to generate revenue on the extra revenue. What, in your opinion, do you think has contributed towards an inability of Zimbabweans to be able to access local players' merchandise or merchandising for local players in the open market? You can walk into a flea market, you'll find something from an international team or wherever it may be, but you're not going to find one for a local team that you may be inclined to. What's happening?
Again, there's no B2B, the business-to-business agreements in our sport. Because you find that if it's Club A, they want to be the ones that control the manufacturing and the selling of those brands. But if you look globally, if Adidas is dealing with the international team, the international team doesn't deal with the merchandise. They get a percentage of that merchandise. But our clubs tend to want to do it all, and yet they are not well staffed to be able to handle that kind of business. It's a huge business when it comes to merchandising. And that's one business that mitigates against issues like Kovitt that we've just alluded to, because shirt sales keep going, and when they make marquee signings, you will find that they get a lot of revenue coming out from the sales of the merchandise from those marquee signings.
Another concern that also comes up is the local authorities and their inability, rather, or maybe you can give me clarity on it, to ensure that their recreational facilities for various sporting codes to be made available. This happened in the past, and we don't seem to have been able to transition into the future with regards to that.
That's one of the biggest problems that we have. Our local authorities, be they rural district council, municipal, town or city councils, they are abdicating on their responsibilities to avail recreational facilities and recreational space. Maybe we have private partnerships with private people who want to assist them where they don't have resources. You know, we have people like Peter Novu, we have Proud Kilimanjaro. We have a lot of people that were part of the old recreational systems. And Namembo, the tennis academy in Fakos, to give examples, they are not there anymore. Why? Because the local authorities are concentrating on other things and forgetting about sport. And you know, recreation is the basis upon which sport is built, because it provides the base for the sport development continuum right up to elite levels. Right. So if you don't have those numbers, those masses, and again, the recreational facilities again answer to long-term athlete development, the interaction with the sport, with the ball, with the facility that the athlete has, yes, to a minimum of 10,000 plus times for an athlete before they get to 18. And they're not getting there because there are no facilities.
Right. So with regards to the function of institutions such as yours, surely lobbying and being able to at least push for such measures to come in place would be required. But I'm sure there are challenges. What's contributing towards that not being able to take place?
No, we had challenges, but now we are very happy because people are now noticing that knowledge is less expensive than ignorance. Now people want to get knowledge because they understand now sport is an academic persuasion where you can then come up with a properly structured plan on how you develop your sport.
Now, let's consider from the private sector. The private sector may see, all right, from a local government or even a national government level, there isn't enough that's being contributed towards sporting codes. And from the private sector goes, listen, we want to be able to put in our money because we see the future of what sports could generate in terms of revenue. What opportunities are available?
The opportunities are there for them to market their brands. They also have a CSR, a community social responsibility to play, because in the communities that they are deriving their wealth, there are communities that also want to benefit from their wealth being taken away from them. So the platforms are there for private players to come in And my plea to them is they must not ambush sports bodies because the management structures are weak, and then they come up with money that I would call donations, and then they in turn call them sponsorships.
Right.
Let's have a difference between donations and sponsorships. But it also boils down to the associations and the clubs and the sports institutions also managing to value their product. They must tell us how much their product is worth, and that calls for education. And organizations such as ours and many others provide the platforms for them to be able to know how much their assets are
Right.
worth.
If there was an angel investor that would come and say, "Listen, I want to be able to invest a blank check into sports in Zimbabwe," where would you advise them to put their attention and focus on?
Sports facilities, because once you have facilities, people will play.
Right.
And putting facilities in the right areas.
I'm glad that you do bring up the issue of sports facilities. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the National Sports Stadium had a failure to meet a certain quota, which was the bucket seats. Right, and by virtue of not being able to do that, we run the risk of actually having our home games played outside of our borders, purely because of our structures not being feasible in terms of meeting the standard and grade. So, in picking from the example that you're given of structures, surely then that addresses where the real problem is.
Yeah, we need proper structures. Even in attractive structure, we'll even attract someone to just come and play. We need to put makeup to those structures. And once the cosmetics and the aesthetics are improved, no one will ban us. I also want to appreciate, though, that the work that government and other private players have, through the Ministry of Sports, the Sports Education Commission, are doing it to the National Sports Stadium. And I've read somewhere that bucket seats are going to be in place, and I surely hope that they're going to be in place. If you look at the turf, the changing rooms, the media rooms there, I think they've done a wonderful job. So it's one step at a time. We'll get there, but remember, time does not wait for us.
As we wrap up our discussions, what will your parting shot be to the public, especially when it comes to the areas of economic viability for sport in Zimbabwe?
It's not really to the public, it's to the sports leaders themselves. Right. I'm saying package your products, that's point number one. Use user experience for you to be able to understand what the clients want. Take time, research a bit, not long, very laborious researches, but just come up with little researches via the digital platforms, and then get to understand what our fans, what those that want to support sport want, so that we go there with more artificial intelligence for business insights.
Thank you so much for your contributions. I'd like to thank my guest in studio, Mr. Russell MARADZA MHIRIBIDI, who is the president of the Sports Leaders Institute of Zimbabwe. Also look forward to speaking to you again in future.
Yeah, thanks, Farai. Pleasure.
That's all the time that we do have here today. Feel free once again to keep sending in your questions, comments, and your contributions to our WhatsApp platform. Also follow us on our social media. That's Economic Forum as Zimbabwe. My name is Farai Gwaze. Pleasant viewing.